second to go for the win. He got it. The Cougars win it. Number one remains number one. Cougars reset. Jackson again finds it. And the Houston Cougars go from the first floor out to the Sweet 16.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby.
Yes! Welcome to the Scott Holland Podcast, emergency edition. We recorded about 24 hours ago here on the show. I had a nice interview with Kat Adamovich, the new Houston Cougar tennis coach. I will start this show that is not about Kat Adamovich, who we think is a fantastic hire, by encouraging you, if you haven't done so already, check it out. It's 23 minutes. It is like almost a commute-sized podcast, I would say. It's a good interview. I challenge you not to get fired up about that program afterwards. But the unexpected news that brings us together unexpectedly, I'll use that word twice there, 24 hours later, is U of H Vice President of Athletics, Chris Pezman, about 4 hours ago. I believe it came out at about 4 o'clock y'all's time. It was 2 o'clock my time. I usually hit like a very mini work lull around 2 p.m. and did not expect that very mini work lull to include quadruple taking at a Joseph Duarte tweet. I believe he was first on it, that Chris Pezman is out as U of H athletic director. So I think we got to get to the facts as they are first. Dustin, didn't expect to be talking to you in this capacity so soon. What are your, I think we're going to start this by talking about the facts as they are, as little speculation, as much just what we know right now, less than 4 hours after the news of Chris Pezman no longer being U of H's athletics top head honcho is out. What were your kind of initial thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's shocking. You said it. No one really seems to have expected it. The three of us certainly didn't expect this. No one that we've seen talking about this seems to even be claiming to pretend like they saw this coming. So very out of left field, but certainly reasons for it. I think that we'll get into here, and we can get into kind of the press conferences and the statements here. But yeah, I mean, overall, first thoughts are just shocked and kind of still processing it. But at the same time, we've been hard on Chris Pezman at times for a good reason. I think there's areas that he hasn't really lived up to what U of H has needed him to be. So very intrigued to see who U of H is able to finally fill the position. But yeah, still just kind of shocked and I think excited for what could be next.
Bobby, before I throw to you, you have reminded me in a non-obtrusive chat way that I've not mentioned our good friends at Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, on the World Wide Web, makers, as always say, of incredibly comfortable U of H wearables, great collection across the college sports universe, also across the Big 12, sponsoring various Big 12 events. Really big folks over there at Charlie Hustle. Good friends of the show here, makers of incredibly comfortable, incredibly unique vintage wearables. You got some new Cougar Charlie Hustle wearables perhaps coming a little bit later this summer. So use our promo code PAWD15. Go to charliehustle.com. What would you give me on a scale of 1 to 10 for that ad read, Bobby? And also, what are your general thoughts here as we're having this, I think, shocking athletic director change here? Again, something 4 hours ago, if you had told me what do you think is going to be the end of Chris Pezman's time at U of H, I think I would have had a lot of scenarios before I got to is getting publicly fired in 15 minutes. Bobby, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, man, it was insane. Also on your sponsor read, 10 out of 10. On an emergency pod, sometimes your brain, we've been hit with so much U of H information that you just kind of forget. And I was like, hey, Charlie Hustle still makes awesome product. You should still buy it.
I gotta be kept on the track sometimes, and I appreciate you contributing to that.
Yeah. So, no, it was just, I had gotten home from work and I did some work stuff and I was doing some stuff in my home office, and suddenly I get a text from Sam and Dustin is what it pops up on my phone. And I was like, oh,
it's our little group chat.
Yep. And it's from Sam and it says, fellas, we need to do an emergency pod. And I was like, whoa, Vesley got fired. And then I logged into Twitter and I was like, whoa, it wasn't Vesley. All right. So yeah, just absolutely insane. If you would have given me 15 guesses to guess why we needed to do an emergency pod, I probably wouldn't have guessed this. So I'm excited to talk about it. It is a new day for Houston Cougar athletics, and let's dive in, fellas.
Yeah, so to just kind of get to, again, what we know, Dr. Khator issued a press release. Notably, it did not come from the athletics department, came directly from her, saying, quote, Chris Pezman has ushered our athletics program through a period of incredible transformation, and we are grateful for his leadership over the past 6 years. He's been a pivotal part of our entry into the Big 12 Conference and championed the success of student athletes on the field and in the classroom. This was a difficult but necessary decision as we navigate a paradigm shift in college athletics. I want to thank Chris for his dedication to U of H and to our student athletes on behalf of the university. I wish Chris and his family the very best. The only thing that I think that we've gotten, as I should probably be, I mean, this isn't updated as the minute, maybe we should double check Joseph Duarte's Twitter before I read
it. It is 7:51 Central right now here on June 20th.
No, as of 36 minutes ago, the only information that he's really given about why the decision happened says a source tells Houston Chronicle that top levels of the U of H administration have become frustrated with athletic director Chris Pezman's inability to make significant progress to increase revenue through sponsorships and fundraising, and it was a, quote, consensus decision to make a change. So that is where we are. Very notably, a lot of people kind of reached out to us right away and were like, hey, so did that have anything? Did y'all's reporting on the softball program have anything to do with that? And to be clear, we have not received any direct indication that was a factor in this decision. However, I think we can say it was been indicated that our reporting did trouble the university president. So, I mean, I think in that sense, you can say, can I say that it was the primary driving factor? No, clearly it wasn't. Was it a secondary factor, a final straw? Yeah, I think it might have been. I think that's kind of our gut feeling as of now. We may learn more because, again, this is a few hours old as of right now, maybe. So it's hard to say either way. I think what our reporting in the softball episode made clear was that probably the softball situation was a failure of leadership on Chris Pezman's part. And for that reason, whether the two are related or not, I think that is a argument that it's a good thing that U of H is moving in a different direction, just because of I think the honest failure of leadership that he had in handling that entire situation.
Yeah, I think what's not. I think the why here is up for debate. Other than I think I generally take to be accurate and well sourced Duarte's reporting that it had to do with fundraising. Friend Ryan at Go Cougs mentioned that he had started hearing things a few weeks ago. Didn't necessarily take him seriously, but that this today wasn't the very first thing that he, any kind of indicator. But I think the what here is undebatable, and that this doesn't feel like a firing, not a hiring, opposite of a hiring, a firing that was a long time coming, or done with a long transition plan, or hey, we're gonna he's gonna, like, with a lot of athletic directors, honestly, you see it like, hey, it's gonna be at the end of the semester, like, hey, in February I'm gonna resign in May or something like that. There are a lot of times, even when it's not I'm going to another school to take that position, it's more of a gradual process than perhaps, at least on the average. I mean, there's like Hunter Yurachek when he left, it wasn't like he saw it the semester. Hunter Yurachek left, and I think within a week or two we had Chris Pezman leaving from Cal to take the same position at the University of Houston. So it just less than 24 hours ago, guys. This is June 20th, June 19th, around this time. I can't remember if it was the Woodlands, or it was one of the Houston suburbs that Chris Pezman was at an alumni fan meet and greet. He was sitting on a stage with Kevin Eschenfelder, the host, Kelvin Sampson, and Willie Fritz, like talking to Cougar fans. Bobby, what was the quote that he said it was a great time to be a Cougar or something like that?
Yeah, it was something along those lines where he said, it's a great time to be a Cougar, hop on the bandwagon or something like that. Let me see if I can find it while you
something that
while you pontificate, buddy.
Was not talking like a guy who was going to the next day be fired. I'm just gonna say that. That's not me saying this is sourced reporting. This is me just saying, as a human being with a sometimes functioning brain.
That also actually ties in, because Duarte also tweeted a little bit before the other one about saying that Pezman was specifically caught off guard by the firing. Mm-hmm. was not expecting it to happen. So I think that is, which again makes sense with everything else that we've seen, that he didn't see this coming. That we've and I couldn't keep myself away from looking at Coug fans, and someone who I think is one of the more reasonable posters on there. said, even within the athletics department, the employees in the athletics department like did not see this coming. We're not expecting
the quote.
to be gone.
The quote from Duarte or from that Duarte said. Pezman said last night, 6:47. So 20. What's that?
23 hours ago. Oh yeah, 25. Sorry,
ago,
doing the time change.
Spread the moment. This is a great time to be a Cougar.
And you
That's
have
not
to
a guy
ask
who thinks he's going to get fired.
That's the one here, that this was a very sudden firing during the summer. Again, not a time. This is not saying unexpected firings don't happen, but this isn't the normal time that ADs get let go. So the why of what made Dr. Khator and the highest levels of U of H leadership decide to move on for Chris Pezman, we're not in that room. We don't have a fully sourced, like, this is why they're doing this. I like you guys. I think I believe dollars and cents are the biggest reason why, but it was a very sudden firing. This was not a gradual, like, hey, at the end of the semester, he's going to go into some very nebulous university leadership position. We're going to find some new blood. This was you have, and again, as somebody who's been a part of corporate layoffs, this was you have 10 to 15 minutes to clean out your desk and leave the building kind of firing, which even on someone like Chris Pezman, who I think I agree with kind of what you said at the start, Dustin, I don't feel like necessarily was living up to the leadership U of H needed in all the areas. I don't think this would have been the top 4 of scenarios that I would have expected here. Like, if you had said, how do you, not the when or even the why, what do you think it's generally going to look like when U of H moves on for Chris Pezman? I think I would have guessed takes lateral job at another athletic department. U of H fans are like, I wish you well, but we're not super, super angry that you're going, because I think there's some well-documented things that fans aren't thrilled with, even if I don't think it was anything close to the little outright revolt. Gets the scenario I kind of laid out earlier, gradually gets moved in some kind of emeritus position. You bring in an outsider or retires to spend more time with family. I would have put those 3 kind of general scenarios way, way, way ahead of gets fired less than 24 hours after being in a very public facing, talking about how excited he is about this time in U of H athletics. There was, whatever it was, there was something that made U of H's leadership really, really strongly want to move on with the absolute quickness. As much as they're the usual press release niceties, this is an alum. This is somebody who, is a people person, at least fancy himself a people person. So I'm very surprised. I don't necessarily disagree with the decision, but I am still, hours later, kind of shocked at it.
I was going to say, one more point real quick, and then I'll, Bobby, in regards to the timing thing, less 2.5 weeks for making a head coaching hire. I mean, you don't let a guy make a head coaching hire if you expect him to be out the door. So like that, I think, is another indication that that this decision was made. I mean, there may have been some things happening slowly, but then some things happened quickly as well. Sorry, go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, so I was just going to give my thoughts on it, and it really is just it's to Sam's point. This is kind of a weird timing. Like the sports are over, so like maybe you can kind of understand it's kind of the off season, but you to your point, Sam, you tend to hear people start talking about these moves happening a little bit earlier, setting themselves up so that they can come in during the summer and get everything
like about a month ago, maybe
things like that. Yeah, you can see that. I think the other thing that's really telling here is the fact that the interim AD was not brought in from the athletics department. This is somebody who is in charge of administration and finance. And the crazy thing about that to me is somebody who handles administration and finance probably knows a little bit about contracts, and knows the deal with contracts and what's happening. That really feels like a move where, and granted, it is an interim title. Maybe he's the one who was available and they said, hey, we're giving this to you and this means nothing, right? This is pure speculation on my part. But really, when you bring somebody in who's in charge of the pocketbook, that shows that you're not happy with how the pocketbook's going. And the other thing is, if he's in charge of administration, you're not happy with the administration of the
administrating.
And your role as an athletic director is the thing everybody sees is, the hiring coaches and going out and fundraising and doing things like that. But it's your job to administer the athletic department and to run the athletic department and make sure things like investigations about players having handguns with them.
Any of those happened recently?
Is something that like falls through the cracks, and it starts to get you to go, hey, wait a minute. I'm not saying, again, like we've said, that this was all because of our reporting. I mean, the money definitely is a thing, and Pezman's been crying poor for 2-3 months now, and meanwhile we're building new facilities, we're doing all these things, yet we're crying poor that we can't fire coaches and we can't let coaches go, and we allow underperforming coaches to stay, while also doing things that are costing cost a lot of money. And I think it's really telling about our status in NIL that every coach has talked about NIL and how important it is. And that's something I don't think anyone is arguing with that. Guys, I hate to say this because it's a really, really cool car, but the fact that was our best idea for NIL is a little troubling. And if you're somebody like Dr. Khator, you see schools that have come in to the conference with us, BYU and UCF and Cincinnati, they seem to have figured something out with NIL. Look at UCF's recruiting class right now in terms of football. It's really good. Everyone seems to have figured something out, and we still don't have everything figured out. There's not a place right now that if I wanted to donate $50 a month to U of H NIL, that it's really easy to do, right? And so I can totally see how Dr. Khator sees that. She has always called the athletic department the front porch of the university. She can see that, and she starts to get troubled. Then the softball reporting comes out, and she goes, okay, this is kind of the last straw. I definitely think that the most important thing here was dollars and cents. It is all about the money that we are bringing in terms of NIL and being competitive. When Dr. Khator and everyone saw us go into the Big 12, if I know one thing about Dr. Khator, because I've been watching her for 17 years since she came to U of H, which that was my freshman year of college. I feel old saying that. She's been here for 17 years, and if there's one thing she doesn't like, it's mediocrity. Look at how we've developed as a university. Look how we've developed different programs that we have within our athletic department. Look at the ratings of us as a school in terms of different departments, things like that. If you walk on that campus, I don't know how many people listening have been on campus recently. You will not recognize it unless you graduated in the last 5 years.
I was going to say, I graduated less than 10 years ago. I went back and finished my degree a little bit later than you, Bobby. And it is still largely unrecognizable and in the best way possible. Like, it is incredible. And she's not going to accept mediocrity, like you said.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting, I was listening to the most recent episode of a podcast I like, Split Zone Duo. I know I'm not the only one here that listens to that. They're talking about the Big 12, and one of the things that they're talking about is more broadly in regards to college football is that for years and years and years, the trend was the facilities arms race, right? Because you were making all this money, you weren't paying any of it to the players. So what'd you do? You hired 1 million administrators and you just built 1 million buildings and gave 1 million perks to all the football players. That's not the way things are going. The way with the recent court rulings, universities are going to be directly compensating their athletes soon. You got to fund that somehow. And I feel like I have to imagine part of this conversation was Dr. Khator talking to Chris Pezman and saying, hey, how are we going to do that? And I don't think she liked Chris Pezman's answer based on what happened tonight. I'm guessing that she didn't like Chris Pezman's answer. That's me speculating a little bit. That's me kind of also reading along with what's been reported up until this point. I don't think that's entirely wild speculation, but it's it's kind of a cliche at this point, but it is. It's a new day in college athletics, and I think it's entirely possible that and probable even at this point that Dr. Khator basically that's the gist of her statement. Just didn't seem like she thought that Chris Pezman was the right person for the ever changing environment of college athletics. So very much a developing story. By the time the listeners hear this, there may be more information that's come out. Most likely that'll be the case. May not be the last emergency podcast we have to do about this. We'll kind of see what happens. I'm kind of very curious because one of the things that we're kind of talking about with bringing in, like you said, someone to be the interim from outside the athletics department, I think that indicates
that was the biggest red flashing sign that it's not just Chris Pezman. That I think a dissatisfaction at Dr. Khator's level with U of H athletics, period, like top to bottom leadership wise.
And just a little thing, Dustin mentioned the athletic arms race, right? The facilities arm race that has been going on. I will tell you, I worked for the Houston Texans for a year, and I remember we would see videos of the new facilities that were coming out. Oregon in particular, I think 2012, 2013, or yeah, it was like 2013. They unveiled their new locker room, and I remember a lot of us in the front office, we were kind of sitting there on the business side, and we were looking at it, and we were like, "That's nicer than these NFL ones. Like these guys are going to get drafted, and then they're going to come to the NFL locker room and be like, where's
Clemson had like a waterfall or some shit?
Yeah, it's insane, right? And it really, to me, feels like we, granted, because of the money situation that we've always had, right? Like, I know this, but it really feels like we're trying to play catch up in the facilities, and we aren't funding our NIL and paying our players and things like that. Like, we're about 10 years behind, and I think other schools that were in our situation are also behind some of the bigger schools. The problem is now we're up with the schools that had 20 years of funding before us, and the schools that are on our level that came up with us seem to be doing a better job right now.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think the fact that you're bringing someone from outside the athletics department, I think could indicate, and again, it could indicate that, hey, you're bringing in bringing in a finance guy because you want to start getting your athletic department money right in a way that it is not now. I think it could also indicate that, like I said, there's larger issues that Dr. Khator sees within the athletics department, such that she doesn't see anyone in the athletics department that she feels is capable of stepping up and even on an interim basis leading the department. I think that could be a strong indication that she's not done firing people in the athletics department. We'll see how that goes, but I guess it's possible that a week, 2 weeks from now, we come back here and we've got a new athletics director and everything is kind of business back as normal, and it's just kind of replace one guy with the other guy and everything kind of keeps going. But I don't know. I suspect that this is going to be maybe we've just seen a can of worms opened, and there are other worms that are yet to exit that can. So, but no, I was just going to say, like I said, it's very much still a developing story. I feel like we're going to continue to see more dominoes fall here as more of the story comes out in the coming days. But I think in terms of one of the big questions that people have been talking about is what is Chris Pezman's legacy going forward? Because I don't think it's as easy as just a strict he was a good or he was a bad athletics director. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. And again, more information to come out might color what his legacy is as well. But I think the thing that people are going to be quick to bring up is he was the athletics director when U of H moved to the Big 12. I don't know how much he was the driving factor in that versus, I think he deserves some.
I think he played a role. Yeah, I think saying yeah, he didn't do it. That was all Couture and somebody. I think that's a little unfair to him. But yeah, I think he played a role.
Some, if not full credit for that. I mean, he ensured that Kelvin Sampson would finish his career at U of H, something that wasn't a foregone conclusion with the interest that he's had from other schools. He hired David Rare. That's an A+ hire. Tanika Jameson's been a fantastic hire. I thought navigated Leroy Burrell's departure from the track program well. Hired Willie Fritz and Kat Adamovich, who both of whom have to prove it still, but both of whom look like A+ hires on paper. But then you got to talk about even without the money stuff, handed out some inexplicable contract extensions, and maybe this does kind of tie into not being smart enough with the money that you do have. Gave Dana Holgerson a massive contract extension with a massive buyout after 1 year of beating up on a bunch of bad teams when nobody else in the world was bidding for his services.
And I've seen it brought up that because U of H got the official Big 12 invite that fall, so that did trigger something that you had to that Dana could enter negotiations, but you didn't have to give him that contract. Sorry,
you had to give him you don't have to give him that contract with that buyout. I think was
I think the problem with it was the buyout, right? If he comes in and he wins and it's like, okay, yeah, pay that man, but yeah, the buyout I think was the big problem.
Yeah, and then you have, of course, Ron Huey, Kristen Vesely, Todd Whitting. We're just learning that maybe Kristen Vesely is not actually contractually obligated to U of H, but at the very least, Ron Huey and Todd Whitting are for reasons that, despite the fact that neither had their program ready for the Big 12 this year in any meaningful way, neither had sniffed the NCAA tournament since before COVID. In Huey's case, never in 10 years. So, and we keep coming up, why is this person still the coach? Oh, well, they're still under contract. You want to pay well, then why did you give them a contract that was going to run that long when they had proven that little in recent years? Like it all comes back to the athletic director in the same way that, when you talk about coaches and you say, oh, well, it's not the coach's fault, it's the players. who's responsible for recruiting the players? Then, oh yeah, it comes back to the coach. Same thing here. Oh, we just can't afford to fire him because him or her because of their buyout is this or that. Well, who gave them that contract? Like you did. That's still on you. That does not evade you. The AD does not get to evade responsibility for that in any way. So I think that's part of the legacy as well. So and I think maybe that's kind of where I land on that. Is just, hey, he was someone who navigated us through the Big 12 transition in a way that was important and kept Kelvin Sampson around, like I said, but ultimately with the money aspect, the financial aspect of college athletics changing the way it is, just probably wasn't the guy for that next era.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to your point, Dustin, what was so inexplicable is that all the coaches, the three most underperforming coaches you mentioned there, the softball coach, Kristen Vesely, the baseball coach, Todd Whitting, women's basketball coach, Ron Huey, what did those three have in common? Chris Pezman didn't hire any of them. Like you see, normally it's the opposite. Normally, new athletic director comes in and he would, like Pezman's a U of H guy, but Pezman didn't come in off of being Hunter Yurchek's assistant. He came in from a completely different school after not being at U of H for several years in the interim. And I think I want to say wasn't he like Tony Levine's top ops guy? I think somewhere around that era. Again, I don't have his resume memorized, but was to a fault, I think, loyal to coaches that really hadn't proven anything. And it's like you said, Dustin, okay, well, he can't afford about this contract. It's like, my brother in Christ, you're the one who gave out the shitty contract here. Like, what's happening there? And you can, to one of our earlier points, you can only cry poverty so many times without, I think, your bosses who know that fundraising and having enough money to run a successful athletic program, know that's in your purview. Like, you'd only say, so, we just don't have the money to do this, without, I think, your bosses being like, why? And then ultimately, I think what happened here, at least to a large extent, not being happy with your answers of how we can get more money or why we are in this position in the first place. So you kind of alluded to it, Dustin. Interesting tweet that has come out since our episode has begun recording from Duarte. I want to say about like 10 minutes after we started recording. Kristen Vesely, reported by Duarte, only under contract until July 31st of 2024, approximately like 42 days from now as we sit here. So interesting little thing to watch, not directly related to this, though I'm sure we'll touch on that situation a little bit more before we leave this episode. But yeah, I think it's a mixed legacy. You can't say, oh, well, it's entirely bad. Like the Dana Holgorsen extension, bad, though. I think we've heard at least some of that was coming from money people above Chris Pezman, but you can't absolve him from responsibility. When you are the athletic director and a bad contract gets handed out under your watch, you at least bear some kind of, you get some kind of credit when it goes well, even if it was, hey, the money people made it happen. You get some kind of blame when it goes wrong, even if it wasn't 100% you're doing. And from what we've heard, it does sound like he was a positive moving force in U of H moving on Dana Holgorsen, that he was not somebody who was hesitant. That I think he was a positive force for U of H swiftly making a change after the last regular season of football. And I think you can't argue the result of getting Willie Fritz. I mean, obviously years left to bear out how that hire will work at U of H right now in this specific context, but I don't think anyone right now thinks that was a bad hire, which I think is a positive. I think for me, and we'll probably expand on this more before we're done, I do feel like, and this is just me personally, I'm always going to remember, Dustin, when you and I know, Bob, before you entered the picture, Bobby, in the before time, I believe it was our fifth season of doing this podcast. It was the summer of 2019, almost 5 years ago, probably. I think it was around this time of that summer, Dustin. And Chris Pezman comes on our podcast, is exceedingly nice, gives good answers, cannot say a bad word. It was very accommodating. Like somebody in a position to be a prick to us, who was decidedly not, was very nice. I asked him a question about leadership, and I can't get in this guy's head. I don't know how sincere he was at the time, but he talked about servant leadership and feeling like, I'm in this administrative position, but I really serve these student athletes. And I can't help but kind of square that answer with the actions, a couple weeks ago with what we reported, and square what he says with what he actually did. Because, and this was my biggest complaint in the most general sense about Chris Pezman, I felt like Chris Pezman was someone very quick to be out there front and center, which again, I have no problem with him being out there front and center when something goes well, hey, like celebrating what our teams are doing, celebrating, track having a national champion and doing well at outdoors, celebrating volleyball, being this power, celebrating men's basketball, coming into the Big 12 and winning a title for sure. That's all cool stuff worth celebrating. It's part of an AD's job to kind of be, in a sense, a cheerleader about that. But something not so great happens. U of H player at the end of the 2022 season gets caught. Like, U of H went almost a full 20. Remember, very minor thing, but remember Sammy Brown slapping a Tulsa player on national TV at the end, or like after U of H's regular season finale, that you didn't have a statement from athletics like until 24 hours afterwards. Just like anytime something went bad, Chris Pezman turned into the Invisible Man. And we don't just
almost like promoting blue jerseys and getting an entire city hyped up for them, and then somehow not.
We discovered afterwards, okay, like you guys weren't really hyped to like sell a bunch of this stuff because you weren't sure you had the legal ground to do so. Fine, leak that to a reporter. Just say, hey, U of H would love to sell stuff, but they're not sure where they stand, and just let it be this open question. Let it be like, does U of H not want to sell stuff? Does U of H potentially worry about their ability to sell without getting slapped with a cease and desist by the Titans, all that stuff. Just whenever something didn't go exactly to plan, whenever something wasn't like a really exciting thing that an AD would want to get in front of, Chris Pezman was the Invisible Man. And that's not leadership to me. Like, leadership isn't wallowing all the bad stuff. Leadership is also still highlighting the stuff that's going really well. But leadership also isn't like refusing to go on the record about the programs that are underperforming, that are underperforming on contracts that you gave out that were hard to justify in real time, and certainly harder to justify in retrospect. And it certainly isn't what we believe happened with the softball program, and players really trying to go through the right channels to report things they saw going on for years in their program that weren't right, and him maybe giving the appearance of doing something about it and then just ignoring the fucking thing, which certainly from our accounts seems like happened here. And that for me is Chris Pezman's legacy here, is big talk about leadership, big talk about loving this university. And I don't know if it was even insincere talk about loving this university, his alma mater, as a former football letterman. This program, don't believe it was insincere, but the actions for me didn't back it up. And that's why I don't take pleasure in anyone losing their job. I've gone through layoffs. I've gone through stressful, difficult jobs where I didn't know I had all the solutions to the problems, but why I don't think it was the incorrect move, and why I don't think U of H will, even in hindsight, even maybe as we learn more, will regret this move. I think it was suddenly timed, unexpectedly timed, but I don't think incorrectly timed.
Yeah, for me, the legacy is doing a great job in terms of the Sampson getting to the Big 12. Those things, again, it's not something that you want to take away from him because, Khator played a large role in the Big 12 move. Tillman played a large role in the Big 12 move from everything that we've heard. And him basically going to the Big 12 and saying, you need to bring us in. U of H also has a lot of things going for it that make it an easy move it was easy for the Big 12 to take U of H. But, the negatives are definitely there, giving away those big contracts. And one of my, to your point, Sam, where you see Pezman a lot at the positive things. One of my lasting memories of Chris Pezman, I won't forget it. It was our last year in the American. I'm at the women's basketball tournament, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching the game. This was before
Fort Worth,
times.
right?
Yeah, in Fort Worth. This was the before times before I joined the podcast. But I remember texting you guys that I was sitting there, and I just kind of turned around, and I saw Chris Pezman sitting in a chair, feet up, chilling out, with a box of popcorn, like the red and white boxes of popcorn, and he's just funneling it into his mouth, and he's just taking big hands.
Stop making me like him.
and just shoving it in his face and during the game. It was so funny. And then when they lost, you could tell he was pretty upset, but he was like, oh, sometimes you lose them. He looked like what you would picture an alum of the university going to the game and just watching it, which was cool. But on the other hand, I kind of want my AD to be very stressed out when the team is in a conference championship game. Like, I know I shouldn't knock him for that, but it was cool to see him just relaxed and just to see a guy there watching sports and he's just being a fan like the rest of us. But also, you're the athletic director. If they win and you're on the thing with them, I need you to be hype, and I need you to be upset when we lost, because I was upset when we lost, right? So, like, it's never fun watching your school get rid of an alumni. it's not anything that I think. Again, we've all experienced it, being laid off, getting fired, or anything like that. It's not fun. It's not something you wish. He's got to go home and just kind of sit there. And granted, he makes more money than probably the three of us combined. But he's still got to.
I wonder if he got an ill-advised contract that he's getting a nice little golden parachute on. I don't know. I'm speculating. Sorry.
And so you're just kind of sitting there trying to figure out what you're going to do next and what it looks like. And Pezman's not having a good time tonight. I just know from the experience he's not having fun. He's not out like, woo, I'm free. The guy just got let go from his alma mater, doing the job as the top guy in athletics. It's not going to be easy for him. I don't have any real crazy thoughts on was it a good move? Was it not a good move? I mean, I honestly don't know enough about athletics administration at the U of H level. Can you bring somebody better in? Who's available? What's available? Things like that to say, oh yeah, there's this guy available that I think is a home run hire over this. There's some people that have maybe been speculated that we may talk about that we think may be some options, but I don't know enough to know if this was a good thing, a bad thing, is it going to send us in the right direction? Something like that. It's a lot less obvious to me than getting rid of Holgerson and going, okay, I can see the results. I can definitely see results in our athletic program that aren't there, but I can also see some that have been pretty good, like keeping Sampson, Rare being here, things like that. So I can see kind of both sides of this. It's absolutely shocking. I did not expect that text from Sam and then that tweet from Duarte to start us having a conversation tonight.
Yeah, and you touched on thinking about who could be the replacement for Pezman in that role, and I think my gut is that Khator's comments about the changing paradigm of athletics, that leads me to believe that she's going to make a kind of a non-traditional hire. So not just like an AD at a smaller school, someone maybe currently outside of college athletics, something more akin to what the Big 12 did with Brett Yarmarkin as commissioner, and bringing someone from a more business oriented background. Regardless of which way Dr. Khator and U of H leadership want to go, they are going to have a massive pool of qualified candidates. I'm sure of that. This is a really, really good job. In the same way that every U of H head coaching job that opens up, in the future will be the most attractive it's ever been because of the Big 12, and it'll attract the strongest candidates it ever has because of the Big 12. The same thing is true with the athletic director position. There are a lot of people that are going to want to be the athletic director of a growing university, with Dr. Khator leading the way. That's clearly on an upward trajectory in a city like Houston, in a conference like the Big 12. There's just going to be no shortage of qualified people from different walks of life, from different industries that are going to want to crack at that. And I do kind of envy Dr. Khator and U of H leadership for I do and I don't envy them for the people that they're going to get to talk to and the decision that they're going to ultimately have to make. So I can't imagine. And it doesn't seem like, again, a decision that seems like it's been made quickly like this one does, maybe tells you that they don't have someone in mind, that they are doing this and that they're going to kind of see who is all interested in this position. Maybe I could be wrong about that. I'm completely speculating here, but very, very curious to see how they go. Very curious to see even if we get some leaks as to the kind of people that are interviewing for the position, because I imagine it'll be an interesting group.
I saw Jeremiah Dickey, former number 2 to Mac Rhodes for a number of years at U of H. I'm not sure. I was gonna say I think he followed Mac Rhodes to Baylor and was here for a bit under Juracek, but I might have by the time I look. He was at U of H for a while. I've seen him flow as an early candidate, but I am not reporting that news. I am not speaking to the veracity either way. That'd be an interesting early name. Somebody who, not that Mac Rhodes' time at U of H was perfect, but one thing I liked about that specific era, and that I think we didn't necessarily see enough of in a Chris Pezman, is a little bit of ruthlessness. You don't want it to be nothing but ruthlessness, but you need to perform. Like this is a job that's any coaching job is about wins and losses ultimately. Like you shouldn't be one bad season away from losing your job if you're someone who's, had a successful run, but it didn't. I mean, let's look at our softball program, guys. Let's take out all the really ugly stuff we talked about before, just solely look at the on-field results. That's just one example. that program had 4 losing seasons in a row. And at least as of a few weeks ago, well-placed sources willing to tell Joseph Duarte that, oh yeah, we're not moving on the softball coach. Like 4 years in a row of being varying degrees of fucking terrible on the field, which I don't think I'm being unfair in saying that program wasn't enough to cost you your job. Like this needs to be a place where you need to produce. You shouldn't be one bad season away necessarily. Like I think coaches should get time to build a winner, but I think it was just, and how we talked about earlier, it was almost odd how weirdly patient and weirdly non-concerned about sagging results outside of some of the bigger name programs that U of H's athletic administration is. I realize football and men's basketball kind of in that order pay the bills, but you have to care about the wins and losses. Otherwise, and I say this as someone who's a big sports fan, if you don't care about winning or losing the games, the money should go somewhere that's actually about educating people. If that is going to be, what we do. And again, I say that as somebody who is about the most fanatic college sports fan you could be. I do a podcast. I spent extensive amount of time thinking about the questions that we were going to ask the tennis coach in our last episode. Like I care so fucking much, guys, about U of H athletics. And I guess my last thought, I never got the impression, other than wanting to step in front of the spotlight when those teams did do well, that Chris Pezman really did outside of some of the biggest name sports. And that, again, totally my opinion, not in the sky side. I could be totally off base in this, but that's just me speaking as a fan. I would say so. So he was very engaged in U of H athletics, somebody who uses too much of his brain space on thinking about U of H athletics. Yeah,
for me, I feel like not to argue with you. I don't. No, with Dustin is what I was about to say there. I don't know if I think that we're necessarily, even with her statement of with the ever-changing landscape of athletics, I don't know if it's necessarily the right move to get somebody outside of college athletics. I think getting somebody who has shown some willingness or ability to understand NIL, so maybe not I have such a hard time with this idea of getting somebody who hasn't really ever been around an athletic program and then having them run an athletic program and redo that just because they're good at business or they did something good in the entertainment industry, like the
equivalent of Brett Yormark,
Well, man, but I mean, Brett Yormark though had experience in sports, which I think I do expect will be part of this as well. I mean, I don't think you're.
Yeah, but I also think
college athletics you're talking about.
But I also think running the Big 12 is wildly different than running an athletic department. Yeah. Running the Big 12 is more like running a business, right? You're acquiring different sponsorships and you're trying to play. Like that feels wildly different than running an athletic department. Like you are acquiring sponsorships there, but you still have all the school aspect of it. You have, the students still have to pass. The fundraising is wildly different there versus, some of the things that you do on even a professional level. So it just is such a different beast. Rather than an AD at like a smaller athletic department, I could see us getting an associate AD at a larger department. Somebody who has worked in college athletics, who has begun and understands where NIL is going. I think that's the better move than trying to get somebody from outside of athletics whatsoever, or even outside of college athletics. I think even professional sports, having worked in professional sports and been around college sports, it's so wildly different with revenue sharing in professional sports is much different than it is on the college level, and the shares that you're getting, and then you get certain shares for going to bowl games and that kind of, like, it's just not a guaranteed number. So I think one of the big things that Pezman was kind of brought in for was he understood the U of H fan base, right? Being an alum, he kind of understood where we were. He understood what moved us, what got us going, and he just wasn't very good at connecting with the alumni. I think whenever I would go to events and he was there, he was always very nice, very, very a good person to talk to. He always did a great job entertaining the crowd. But if we bring you in to kind of be the person who can connect with this fan base, empty stadiums and an NIL program that is been shown to this point to be kind of ineffective. Not that it's wildly ineffective or anything like that, but it's clear that played a role. His job, it seemed to come in, or when he was hired, it was to get us to a bigger conference and to fundraise so that we could bring more money in and fundraise. And it just doesn't seem like he did it. If you even look at our baseball program, it doesn't seem like Pezman did much of the fundraising there. It was the head coach. The head coach did most of the funding. If you talk to anybody who's been around that baseball team, they will tell you that it has mainly been the coach who did most of the fundraising. It doesn't feel like Pezman did the job he was brought in to do, and that was connect with the U of H fan and alumni and fundraise off of that.
Yeah, I think it is noteworthy that when Pezman was hired 7 years ago, anytime you see those lists of like which athletic departments are most heavily subsidized by the university, U of H was always at the top of the list. And now it's 7 years later, and when you see those lists, U of H is always still at the top of the list.
Yep.
I gotta imagine at some point, Dr. Tor's like, hey, I need you guys to start. I need to kick the teenager out of the house. I need you to get your own job. I need you to keep paying your bills forever. I need you to figure this out. And yeah, it doesn't seem like Chris Pezman got there. And in terms of finding someone that can do that, I think it's possible. I think, again, Bobby, I think you're right. I think it's possible. It's someone that comes from, you go find some SEC school and find who their best fundraising assistant athletic director is, and bring him in and have a conversation with them and see if it's a good fit. I think more than anything, I feel certain that Dr. Khator will talk to a diverse pool of candidates. I think she'll talk to people from outside of college athletics. I think she'll probably talk to people from inside of college athletics too, and get a lot of perspectives and decide who is the right person for the next era in college athletics. So yeah, very interested in that. Yeah, obviously remained very intrigued by we might get one more coaching change this offseason than we thought we were going to, because as we've touched on a couple times, Joseph Duarte tweeting within the last hour or so that Vesley's contract is up. Certainly, you bring in a new athletics director. If her contract,
we have laid eyes, by the way, on a FOIA request of Vesley's current and past contracts that confirms that. Like, by the way, not that I wouldn't take Joseph Duarte totally at faith, but nothing exists out there in a public record that says Kristen Vesley is here past July 31st. Sorry.
Yeah, other than one Joseph Duarte tweet, which he is now tweeting that, in fact, the contract that we've all laid our eyes on is correct, which expires this summer. And again, if you've got a year left and you don't want to buy her out or something, then maybe it's even a question for the next athletics director, assuming that Dr. Khator isn't so incensed by what's going on that hiring the next athletic director, part of that conversation would have been hey, by the way, within the first week, you're going to politely announce the dismissal of the softball coach. But no, I think one thing that's really interesting is because, obviously Joseph Duarte was told, or he wouldn't have tweeted it, that by people in the U of H athletics department that Vesley was coming back for next year. If she well and truly wasn't under contract, that means that Chris Pezman's intention was to somehow sneak her onto another 1 or 2 year contract or something, which is even that's if he thought that she was going to be back next year, that it has to be that, right? Or, unless she has a contract that becomes a month by month, when it's up, and I don't know. I still don't know. I still am not entirely sure on that, but certainly if the contract is up this summer and you're bringing in a new athletics director, the likelihood that U of H will have a new softball coach for the 2025 season seems like it has gone very, very much up in the last few hours since that news broke. So we'll see how that goes, but very, very curious to see, who the new AD is, whether or not they make a softball move right away. You kind of imagine at this point that baseball and women's hoops are maybe far enough in the cycle with a year and 2 years left on those contracts that the new AD would wait those out and make decisions after the next season. But yeah, kind of like going back to what I said earlier, just feels like there's more dominoes that are still going to fall this offseason within the U of H athletics department.
And just one kind of quick thing, you mentioned earlier you had gone on Kook Fans and were just kind of surfing around, even though we sometimes try not to, so it doesn't influence us too much. Somebody posted a video from the press conference about the football operations building the new end zone facility. And it was before it started. They're kind of rounding everybody up to get all their thoughts. And you see Fertitta look over at who's he looking at? He looks over at somebody, I can't remember who it was, and he just kind of looks at him and goes, "Why are we doing this on a Friday afternoon? Are we trying not to get any press on this?" And it just seemed one of those things.
That was the one in November with Dana was there too.
Yeah,
like.
that's who he was talking to, was Dana. That's right. And he like leans over to him and he's like, "Why are we doing this on a Friday afternoon? Are we trying to get as little press as possible?" And it's just little things like that anybody who's ever dealt with our athletic department kind of has felt that, right? Like, I remember not last season, but the season before, Sam and I met up for the, it was, I think the Halloween game or something like that. We met up.
I think that was, I was out here. I think that was you and.
Maybe it was our friend Ben. I thought it may have been you.
But I was not back in Texas for that disaster of a football game.
But I was there, and they were selling the black hats. It was like the blackout game, and they were going to sell.
Oh, the SMU game. That was the SMU game.
SMU game. Yeah, they were going to have
21.
the black hats with the white cougar paw, and they were like, "You're." And we walked around
looking for him. I couldn't find him.
We walked around everywhere looking for him, and they were like, "They're going to be here." And then we got there, and then we go to the bookstore. I remember me and you go to the bookstore. And we're looking for something black to wear to the game. We're like, there's got to be a black U of H shirt, a black U of H hat, something. It's the blackout game. Like, can we do this? And we walked to that store in the UC, or the student center, whatever they call it now.
Us be the UC to me.
Us olds call it the UC. And then there was another gift shop by the stadium.
The one in the garage, yeah.
Yeah, the one in the garage. It's since closed down. There wasn't a black item anywhere. Not the specialty hat. Like, maybe he has that and it doesn't get printed in time. Right? You knew the blackout game was coming. Like, that blackout game was coming. Let me buy something black with red. I was ready to spend money.
Me too.
It's the thing, and I've said this. I've said this on the pod probably 100 times. There is not a university in the country that is better at not taking their fans' money than the University of Houston. It's absolutely insane. And it's got to be part of the reason why this athletic department is still one of the most subsidized, and part of the reason why Chris Pezman isn't here anymore.
I think that's a good place to end it on. I don't have anything else new to add.
Yeah, I have exhausted my notes. I think we've touched on it for almost an hour now. We've touched on a lot of subjects here. So, like I said, it's an hour's worth of discussion, and I think that's probably just the beginning of discussing this whole overall subject that we're going to be doing. So looking forward to that, looking forward to knowing more about this in the future, but had to jump on here and bring you guys the instant react. So on our way out, going to give a big Scott and Holden podcast shout out to our Patreon supporters. If you want to, if you appreciate the work that we're doing here every week, you feel like you can put $5 a month behind it, we would love for you to go to patreon.com/shpodcast. You can also get in contact with us by emailing us, shpodcast@gmail.com, tweeting at us at shpodcast, or blue skying at us at podcast.bsky. So I don't know why I'm saying that like we ever post on there,
it's muscle memory. Power through.
I mean, technically, you can, if you message us, I will probably see it and respond. So
it may take a month, but he'll see it.
But I'll get to it. Anyway, if you made it to the end of this silliness, that's good on you. And as always,
go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs. Let's go.